a little combo pack.
Welcome.
Okay, fantastic, thanks. So I hear that we're up against the assist data presentation, so I understand. Actually, I wanted to listen to that one too, so thanks for coming. That was a fabulous introduction. Today I want to talk about school technology leadership and the P20 continuum, P20 being a key word here that we'll return to. So a little bit, that was a great introduction, a little bit about me. Probably like a lot of you, and probably we're all fitting in Terry's idealist framework. I started off with goal number one was to save the world. Turns out that doesn't pay all that well, and there's no job called, save the worldologist or anything. So my wife thought that I needed a better plan than that. So I came up with a better plan, and I went into teaching, and I loved it. I taught just north of Carbondale, across the river. You guys know Carbondale and Southern Illinois? Okay. Just north of that in a little town called Nashville. I taught high school, and that was a great time. I was teaching, though, under Title I, which doesn't pay all that particularly well. And secondly, I was really fascinated by the leadership challenges, so I thought I should go into leadership, and I was especially interested in educational law. So I came up with another plan then to move forward to advocacy, being a lawyer for a few years, and that was great fun, but I found myself being a little bit far away from goal number one there on the screen, so I felt like I needed to probably get a little bit closer to goal number one, and so that led me then to my current position as a researcher, where I get to do teaching and advocacy, and that's great fun, and of course thanks to UK, and I always throw that in, thanks for paying the bills. And hopefully that keeps me pretty close to goal number one. Interestingly, though, as I'm going throughout this process, I find myself in my job as a teacher using machines that looked a little bit like that. Maybe not quite that old. I don't know if I'm that old, but we all remember that phase. When I moved on to law, I was using machines that looked a lot like that. Nowadays, I use machines that look like this all the time. And so I figure that in order for me to accomplish goal number one, it's probably going to involve machines that look a little bit like that. And so I've had an interest in technology for a long time, even though I get paid to teach education and law. A lot of the principal superintendents went through a leadership preparation program. Somebody taught school law in that program. That's what I do for the university. But I'm still super interested in technology. That's led me to this position as the associate director of CASTLE, which, as far as we know, is the only center in the world that's dedicated to the technology needs of school leaders. Only. We focus almost entirely on school leaders. For CASTLE, I am their school technology law person, of course, right? We put all the pieces together, and that's what it adds up to. So I blog and write a lot on educational technology law. The issues, acceptable use policies, the off-campus speech issues with the kids twittering your teachers on Facebook, all of these types of issues are what I write a lot about in my research, and that's what I do there at the Jurist. So that's a little bit about me. Today I'm not going to focus really a lot on the law component. It's embedded, but I'm not going to focus on it that much. But feel free to ask any law questions that you want. I'm fine with those as well. So today I want to talk about three changes, two concerns that I have because of those changes, and one developing plan that I'm here representing the University of Kentucky for in this plan that we have. So first, the three changes. Change number one. I, of course, want to talk about technology. Actually, I want to talk about technology change, and really I want to talk about rapid technology change. The following is a list of inventions of the 20th century. It's small, we'll highlight a few. In 1901, we sent the first radio transmission across the Atlantic. Okay, that was a big step forward for us. In 1903, we flew the first airplane. In 1908, we did the Model T. In 1910, we did motion pictures. In 1927, we did television. In 1932, we invented modern photography. In 1937, we invented photocopiers. In 1941, software-controlled computers. In 1945, the atomic bomb. 1955, fiber optics. 1958, lasers. 1959, the microchip. 1967, calculators. 1968, RAM. 1972, word processing. 1978, spreadsheets. 79, we did cell phones. 81, we did personal computers. And in 1990, we created a thing called the World Wide Web. And that's a good stopping point for us. And it was at that point that technology really hit a new stage. I want to remind you, of course, what an exponential curve looks like. You've seen these things. Some of you math teachers have taught these things. So the math teachers out there, on logarithmic graphs, exponential curves look like straight lines. Okay, keep that in mind. Maybe you've heard of this thing. It's called Moore's Law. This law states that the computing capacity of a basic chip is doubling every 2 years, meaning we're in exponential growth. And you can see there on the y-axis, that axis is growing exponentially, and thus we have a straight line. You guys remember these numbers, right? We had a 286s, 386, 486, then we switched to the Pentiums, then we did Pentium 1, 2, 3, 4s. Pentium 4s, we thought we were getting somewhere. Then we invented quad cores, now we have dual core and quad core processors. So, remarkably constant exponential growth in the computing capacity of basic chips that run machines like this one that's running this PowerPoint chip. So that's interesting that we have this exponential growth, and it speaks to a larger phenomenon that's happening in society, and a broader law. This is Kurzweil's law. This is Ray Kurzweil. He's a futurist. I don't really know how you get that job, but that sounds like a good one. And here's what Ray has to say. An analysis of the history of technology shows that technological change is exponential, contrary to the common sense intuitive linear view. So we won't experience 100 years of progress in the 21st century. It'll be more like 20,000 years of progress at today's rate. So we don't know what the future holds, but we do know that it will be exponentially different. That's the end of change number 1. Change number 2 that I want to address. I want to talk about information, and I really want to focus on information revolutions in history. First, we need to think about an awesome technology. So we don't think about this as a technology, but it is. And that's paper. Paper is actually a remarkable technology. If you go back in history a bit, paper used to look like that, and before that we did stuff that looked like this, and before that we were doing that. Okay, so we've gone back a lot in history. But the fundamental thing that's happening here is humans are preserving information over time. And so writing on cave walls was revolutionary because we took information outside of our own physical bodies and stored it and could re-access it at a later time. And that's fabulous. That's an amazing technology. Now, of course, the technology behind this particular form of information storage was quite rudimentary, obviously. It was in caves, they're dark, got to return to the same place. But still, revolutionary. We moved forward from that to a technology that looked like this, called parchment. It too was revolutionary because what did this allow us to do? Now we could move that information from place to place. And that was fantastic. We could take information with us. Of course, the production capacity of information technology like this is not very high. And of course, the cost of this technology is extremely expensive. You actually have to kill something to do it. That's the skin of the goat. So parchment was not a fantastically efficient information technology tool. The Egyptians improved on it. They didn't really improve on the basic concept, but what they improved on was the production capacity of the information technology. Instead of using animals, they used plants, paper. This is papyrus that was just a leaf growing in the Nile River Delta. And the Egyptians put it together and found out you could write on it and store it. And so that took the amount of information that was capable of being stored exponentially larger. And so that, too, is revolutionary. And then that basic technology really has not changed much for the past couple thousand years. We did, about 500 years ago, radically alter the production capacity. Again, we grew exponentially in our production capacity when we invented the printing press. And we are coming out of the printing press age. We built enormous monuments to this information technology, the capability to store information on paper and reproduce it in large numbers with the printing press. And we built huge monuments to it. This is the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., one of the world's foremost libraries. Absolutely gorgeous monument built on this basic information technology. All the books in the Library of Congress, of course, were printed on some type of printing press, and the information was stored on paper. And that is a fantastic technology, but that technology has limitations, just like every technology always has limitations. The limitations here were that you had to re-access that place in order to re-access the information, or you had to move the book from location to location. And you can see that the information was not separated from the physical storage location of the book. Right? You follow in the Whitman circles. Okay, fantastic. This is what we've changed. We've separated information from the physical location. All right? That is the essential thing that has happened in the past, going on 2 decades now, since 1900. We took all that information, we turned it into ones and zeros, and we sent it whirling down fiber optic cables at the speed of light. And so we can move information in a way that has never happened before in human history. We know this, right? But I think it's important for us to think about the changes that have happened to allow for this type of revolution to happen. Now, when revolutions like this happen, they have enormous consequences. The production capacity of this information technology is enormous compared to the previous production capacity of the printing press. We are going to produce, based on some estimates, I picked a middle estimate, there's estimates on the lower side and estimates much, much higher. We're going to produce about 70 exabytes of information, which, to try and put it in some kind of understandable term, is 70 billion gigabytes of information this year. That's in 2009, the estimates are. To understand 70 exabytes further, 70 exabytes is larger than the Library of Congress. Actually, it's a lot larger than the Library of Congress. It's actually 518,000 times the Library of Congress in new information that we produced this year, and with a fairly conservative estimate. And 0.01% of that information is going to be replicated on paper. That's the end of change number 2. Change number 3, Web 2.0. Heard of this term, right? So let's take a look at what this is. Around 1995, the web was an incredibly boring place. It was mostly just scientists talking to other scientists. And I don't know why, but people find that boring. I think that's sort of fun, right? But, most people didn't find that all that interesting. And so the web was not very useful around 1995. What we needed was a whole lot of people. And we needed those people to have a special characteristic. Those people needed to be ordinary. And around 2001, all the ordinary people showed up. And they actually turned out they wanted stuff. They wanted video, and they wanted pictures. Those are sort of some high-tech things, right? Flickr and YouTube, those are fun. But they also wanted more basic things. They wanted maps. They wanted encyclopedias. They wanted to buy stuff and sell stuff and share stuff. And they wanted to fall in love. And they wanted to maintain relationships. And they wanted to do it all locally. Right? The internet has met the needs of these people's wants. And so this is really what Web 2.0 is. It's blogging, it's Twitter. Yes, those things are important. I mean, in the introduction we hear that I do those things. But what really changed with Web 2.0 was all the ordinary people showed up. And when things are ordinary, they actually are useful. And when they're useful, they are indispensable. End of change number 3. So now I want to turn to some concerns that I have in light of these kinds of changes that are happening to society. So concern number 1. They want learning now. I should say that again. They want learning now. As in, everything is on the web. This is the line of thought. The web is useful for everything. Everything should include learning. Schooling, of course, does not necessarily equal learning, and learning does not necessarily equal schooling, and that's okay. That's good. because a whole lot of learning is already happening on the web. I don't know, 80% of what I learn probably comes based off of that information technology. But schools have been a little bit slow to adopt. What are schools most known for with the web? They block it. So most of the world's new information is digital, so our analog schools necessarily become more detached from learning. And that's an important point. I mean, it can get a lot of different people to say it, but I'll just go with this one. America's high schools are obsolete. By obsolete, I just don't mean that they're broken, flawed, or underfunded. There are cases to be made for each one of those. By obsolete, I mean our high schools, even when they're working as designed, cannot teach our students what they need to know today. And why is this? Well, I mean, part of the fundamental issue here is our schools were built in the early 1900s for an economy that looked a whole lot like agriculture and labor. That economy has, of course, transitioned. Our agricultural jobs have been mostly replaced by machines. You don't see that many people out there hoeing fields anymore. And for the most part, a lot of our manufacturing jobs have went overseas. We all know that, like using manufacturing jobs. In place of that came the service and creative economies. And those economies, of course, demand that we have a schooling system that is somewhat different than the schooling system designed in the early 1900s. That's the end of my first concern. Here's my second concern. There are systemic restraints on innovation. Our system is working against some potential leaders. Here are a list of technologies, huge inventions, big money makers that have been invented in the past 10 years or so. The actual World Wide Web itself was developed by researchers at CERN, which that's the place that was going to cause the black hole in the Bible. You haven't heard about that. A little bit maybe. Anyway, that's in Switzerland. Hotmail, which was like modern day email, was created by an Indian immigrant. Skype was created by Swedes. Yahoo and Google were created by Stanford dropouts. Facebook was created by Harvard, and Wikipedia was created by a student that didn't finish his PhD in Indiana. I don't mention that. And here's the latest one, of course, Twitter. This is the hottest. You've heard of Twitter. This is the hottest technology going for now. Another 6 months, it'll be something else. Twitter was created by a guy named Jack Dorsey, who was born just up the river in St. Louis. He's 32, maybe 33 now. And of course, what's his characteristic? He's an NYU dropout. This is not by chance. These things are not coincidence. These are all kids and non-Americans, but essentially what they are outsiders to the system. Because the system, if you're an insider to that system, it is difficult to be an innovator. Because there are systemic restraints on innovation. And what are some of those restraints? Well, that's one. That's one. Your school board members might be one. And this might be a systemic restraint on innovation. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Bureaucracies are built to be restricted. That's why we have them, so that we can predict what governments will do. So bureaucracies are restricted. They're built on the foundation of law that is meant to be restricted. That's why we have them. And of course, our entire educational system is built on school law components, and so it necessarily is a little restrictive. And fundamentally, when you add those things together, it actually turns out that democracy itself is a restrictive enterprise. Now, that said, we have changed in the past, right? And there may be no one that I would want to talk to more about how to change a democracy than this guy, and that's what he had to say. No social advance rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of dedicated individuals. That's fantastic. So democracies can change, but it is dependent on leaders. Now, most schools look something like this, just one I pulled off the web. But the hierarchical structure usually has this component, no matter what your school organizational chart looks like. And when you put someone at that place, they actually get to wield a whole lot of control. They can control the budget and the personnel and the assignments and the facilities and the time, the discipline, the curriculum, the evaluations, and the school policy even. And what all that adds up to is they can actually control change. So that is an important part to keep in mind, because if the school leaders don't get it, it's not going to happen. But of course we have systemic restraints on these school leaders. And so what winds up happening are that the people in charge of leading organizations into the 21st century are often the least knowledgeable about the 21st century. That's the end of concern number 2. To summarize this, I thought I'll bring in a little bit of technology ourselves and show you a video of some of the leading innovators from across the planet that are trying to transform schools right now.
The U.S. Department of Commerce ranked 55 industry sectors by their level of IT intensiveness. Education was ranked number 55, the lowest, below coal mining.
For the last 100 years, we've used the industrial narrative. Schools are like factories. It's an administrative process. It's about control and order.
The kids are having a much more stimulating and rich environment outside of schools than they are in school.
Kids are very rich content developers today through their social networking sites. They're big communicators through email, instant messaging, and text messaging, and yet all of those things are banned from their schools.
If you turned off the choice, it potentially turned off child.
We have to accept as educators that technology is not really a choice. It has created a world. It's just not here to help you teach traditional subjects. It has invented, has emerged a completely new environment.
It's about relationship, it's about community, it's about connectivity, it's about access.
Children are living now in a different space. They're living in what I call nearly now. And nearly now is that space that they're texting, a space that they Facebook entries in, a space that they Twitter, a space that is not quite synchronous. Now, it's a really interesting space because it's not adversarial, it's not pressure. It's a space where people can, it's really harmless, they can reflect and retract and research and repeat. It's a very gentle, I tell you what, it's a great world for learning.
If I could remodel a classroom today, I'm not sure it would be a bricks and mortar classroom.
So the students at the center in school is just one of the ways and places that they learn. But they also learn through community, at home, in museums, in libraries, and of course online.
It's about providing the best quality teachers no matter where a student lives and making those bridges.
It's wandering around the city with their cell phones and collecting data that kids will be doing outside of school.
School might be the place where you come together to do joint projects, where you social network, where you do some of the other kinds of enrichment things.
We've got a classroom system when we could have a community system.
It's about opening the door to NASA resources, to the labs that are being developed online at MIT, and connecting these students to the kinds of opportunities that will fundamentally shift their academic experience and make them better prepared not only for college, but for life.
You start with a teacher. If I want my students to be making global connections, then I'm going to give the tools to my teachers first and provide them with opportunities to connect with other teachers around the world or other teachers around the country.
The task here is to give teachers a place where they can swap authentic ingredients and their evidence of those ingredients so they're safe and tested. Do you know that doesn't exist anywhere in the world? I've just been part of a big project that I think is going to change that and change that rapidly.
We have to develop a narrative that sustains 21st century learning.
If we simply apply standards, if we simply have a steady regime of standardized testing, that will make things better. When in fact, it is economically actually a foolish idea, because the jobs that these kids in school will be having do not call for this kind of right answer vending machine approach.
They've moved out, they've been phased away. It enables local creativity and innovations.
They will be doing work that calls on their artistic abilities, that calls on their abilities of synthesis, that calls on their abilities of understanding context, that calls on their abilities of working with teams, It calls on their abilities in some sense to be multidisciplinary, multilingual, multicultural.
So the coin of the realm is not memorizing the facts that they're going to need to know for the rest of their lives. The coin of the realm will be you know how to find information, you know how to validate it, you know how to synthesize it, you know how to leverage it, you know how to communicate it, you know how to collaborate with it, you know how to problem solve with it. That's the new 21st century set of literacies. And it looks a lot different than the model that most of us were raised in.
Now we're looking at a whole different range of schools. We're looking at schools that are producing genius, collaborative, gregarious, brave children who care about stuff like their culture. And those schools that do that is a whole other challenge. And around the world, people are testing out the ingredients of what makes that work. And those ingredients are being assembled into some just stunning recipes in different places. It's a very exciting time for learning. It's the death of education, but it's the dawn of learning. That makes me very happy.
So these are all the guys' names. We won't take time. I can give you the video address if you want to go check it out. So, based off of the changes that are happening, rapid technology development, information revolutions, ordinary people coming into the web, and keeping in mind the concerns that we have, that schooling may be a bit outdated, and that we need leaders to change democracies, I present to you a developing, and I want to stress developing, plan. To understand what we are planning at the University of Kentucky, you have to understand this woman. This is our new dean. Her name is Mary John O'Hare. What's important about Dean O'Hare, besides that she's a very nice lady, and hope you all get to meet her, is that she built in Oklahoma a thing called the K20 Center. And the K20 Center, well, you know what? It's easier if I let them tell you about it.
P20 Center's approach to innovation and to moving from very conventional, oftentimes isolated schools to more of a learning community, we've developed a 4-phase model to do so. Phase 1 is for the leaders to come together, to learn from others, and learn from each other how to make changes in their school to implement the 10 practices of IT.
I was very impressed with the leadership. It made me think about how important technology was and how through the K20 Center, we had an opportunity to make drastic changes in our school.
In phase 2, whole schools look at the 10 practices for hygiene in schools, pick 3 practices, look at how technology can facilitate the changes to improve those 3 practices in their own school. And our research has shown that technology is something that really hooks the students. It gets them involved, it gets them engaged in their learning, they're paying attention, so they're able to retain the information and make those connections with the content that they're learning in the classroom. We went from having no technology to now we're using smartboards all day long. Everything that I have learned on the smartboard and teaching with the smartboard has been a result of the training we've received from the K20. Smartboards are just the biggest self-esteem builders that there's been in my classroom. They feel so powerful when they use them, and things happen with the touch of a finger. It's just like magic to them.
In just 1 year of having implemented the technology, our before test scores in first grade we had a 1.5 increase to 2.0 very quickly. In second grade, we saw an increase from 2.5 to 3.0.
Did you see it? Return it. And the K20 has done all of this staff development this year. And it's built a much more cohesive faculty and a faculty that's excited about learning. And they put their technology to very good use.
Whenever we got the grant about technology was great. But I was really amazed at how the shared values, shared leadership offered the future, how we really made that evolve and really made a strong teamwork within the school.
And if I walk away with one thing that I said was the most important thing, collaboration with my peers probably would be it.
We're in phase 3. this past school year, we've been working on a science initiative, science PDI.
Then we work to find other projects working with their teachers in depth in STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
If the students are still really interested in those STEM content areas, then they can move into the university, they can continue work and learning there, and then we'll be able to go out into those types of fields.
We take out the books and we tell kids this is what's been done in science, look what we know about science, but they don't really know science until they do science. And I think the staffification has helped me make sure that my students do science.
Having a center coming in and just open up world to, colleges there, that you can study computer science or engineering or whatever you want to do. And then you realize, there are alternatives to what you want to do. Just mention that again.
In our science lessons today, the students will be investigating how the properties of a liquid change when water is added to it. They will get to first observe the liquid when the water is added, and let them talk about that, and they're going to shake the liquid and the water together, and then talk about the difference. And then we're going to leave them overnight, and then tomorrow we will go back and look at the differences. They have a much bigger knowledge of science because of that, and because of I think maybe we have a bigger knowledge of science and how to best use it for our classrooms.
The digital game-based learning environment which we've created is based on giving students who are digital natives an opportunity to go into a space which they're comfortable with. At the same time, we're trying to build a bridge to those digital immigrants who are their teachers, who grew up before this was becoming place, and show them that they are addressing those learning centers, which the teachers are responsible for.
The K20 Center is really here to support the schools throughout the long haul.
I think all of our phases never stop. They're ongoing.
For the better part of 2 years, I've been in contact with them probably every month or every couple of months, and that makes a lasting impression. We have an ongoing relationship.
Our workforce and preparation for those 21st century jobs and careers, we are better able to meet the needs of the state in our workforce development and economic development if we all work together.
Okay, so that was Dean O'Hara at the beginning and the end, explaining a little bit about what K20 did in Oklahoma. Just some statistics of what happened in Oklahoma. This wasn't a small deal. Over about a decade, they worked with 794 schools, 1,400 school leaders, 9,000 teachers, had some contact with over 100,000 students, and essentially we're working with 96% of districts. That might be easier to imagine when you look at it like that. In the school, the blue dots are the schools and the red dots are the districts. The most important number, though, for your purposes, that you care about, that I care about, was 74%. 74% was the percentage of greater increase on the State Academic Performance Index for schools that were involved in the K20 project than average schools that were not involved in the K20 project. Of course, that's Oklahoma. And we are not Oklahoma, we are Kentucky. So we're going to need a different but related plan. We're calling our plan P20. You know the childhood folks out there? We have one in my department, but it's fantastic. So we're going to go with P20 language. I can't call it a center yet by university regulation. I'm only allowed to call it P20 initiative at this point. But we have $1.5 million in seed money from the president of the University of Kentucky. So we can hire whoever we need to hire in the next couple of years and put whoever we need to put in place. We are also part of the Race to the Top application. Dr. Holliday, for those of you that were here for his presentation this morning, obviously there's a lot of overlap between what his vision is for Kentucky schools and what the K20 Center did in Oklahoma and what we hope to do here in Kentucky. We're going to go with 5 phases here in Kentucky, similar to the phases you saw in the video, but we're going to start off with leaders. So the first year is leader learning, and what that entails is leaders coming to a summer institute 2-3 days. We'll bring in some folks from around the world, some great folks who will also give you time to talk with all of your peers on these issues. That will then be sustained throughout the year by networks, maybe meeting one more time, but certainly meeting online in different environments over the course of the year. That's phase 1. In phase 1, if very little structurally happens, that's okay with us. That's okay, because you have to have time, right? You can't just snap fingers and make things change in schools. So the first year is time for the leaders to learn and reflect and think about what they might want to do in their school. The second year, then, we begin to build infrastructure. The second year involves grants for your schools. Those grants will be both for technology components. If you need to buy a smart board, fine. If you need to buy some software, fine. If you want to do some of the response things in schools, the little remote controls, that's fine. So there'll be money for technology, but there'll also be money for professional development so that the leader can build the leadership team that it's going to take to pull this off in their school or in their district. And I should say in the first phase, we want head principals or head superintendents. We want the leader in these cases. So phase 2 then starts to address leadership at a little bit lower level. This is teacher leaders, maybe assistant principals, folks like that. We'll send staff out to your schools to help you develop your whole school learning plan. So then you emerge out of phase 2 into phase 3, which is now we'll start talking to teachers. So you can see we spent 2 years just with leaders first. That's not by accident. So phase 3 finally we move to teachers. And we help teachers think about how they can teach more effectively, maybe using some technology tools, but also, getting them up to speed on the challenges that their schools are going to face, that their kids are going to face. And we're going to focus heavily in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and math. One of the great things about this is that we can bring the university resources to bear on some of your schools. And I was impressed that we're in a UK College of Engineering building here today. So those are the kinds of things that we want to further and bring some of that learning into your classrooms. Phase 4, we're going to address students and try and take their learning to a new platform. We're going to try lots of different things. In Oklahoma, they found a lot of success with game-based learning. So they built video games embedded with a lot of the content knowledge in the video game. And they found a lot of success with that. The test scores have shown improvements in content attainment. So we'll try some of that. We'll do some social networking for the kids, let the kids try and teach each other more. Phase 4 is about students and taking your learning tools to new places. And finally, phase 5, which is in addition to Kentucky, is P20 scholars. So schools that are part of the P20 network, their students, their high school seniors, can then apply for scholarships to the University of Kentucky and hopefully other universities. I mean, we don't really have a patent on this. We just are doing it because we have the dean that did it in Oklahoma. But hopefully other universities will join us. So a scholarship to come to the University of Kentucky, study in STEM areas or maybe other areas. But as part of the exchange for that scholarship is that they have to take that knowledge back to their local districts that they came out of in the P20 schools. And so while they're in college, a requirement on them will be that they have to go and help the schools that they came out of before. So they're bringing the science, technology, engineering, and math knowledge from the university and then bringing it back to your local schools. That's the plan. You can see our pyramid looks like this. It's inverted. It's an inverted pyramid based off of the number. It's the opposite pyramid, I guess, based off of the number of people. You have your largest amount of students in the global broader economy, then students are the largest group. Teachers, of course, are a smaller group. Teacher leaders and assistant principals are a smaller group yet, and then leaders are the smallest. But we've inverted the triangle, because one thing that I hope came across in the presentation is that we care about the leaders first. These things don't work without the leaders. We've seen it on lots and lots of grants that have come out of the federal government. When you target the teachers first, the teachers will implement, but then the teachers will move on and the initiative will fall apart over time. That initiative does not necessarily translate up. So we are going to focus heavily on the leaders, because that's the core change agent that can allow schools to change. We're going to roll this out in summer. We're going to start. It's happening pretty quickly. But in the summer of 2010, we're going to start with our first cohort of leaders. We're thinking there'll be about 40 leaders. We'll bring you into Lexington, give you some technology, maybe a netbook, something like that, and then begin the process. And then in subsequent years, we'll have more. But in phase one, we don't want to jump in over our heads here. So we're going to start a little small. And of course, the details are still developing. But passed around a handout that has more information. A bunch of the partners that we're working with. KDE is just extremely on board at the moment. We'll see what that translates into, but they seem very pleased with the idea. And then there's contact if you want more information. You can, of course, talk to me like cards as well. So I think the summary for my presentation here today is this. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And I think that that's a good element